Hello, my name is John Sayer, Technical Marketing Manager, Civil Infrastructure here at Autodesk. Today I would like to talk with you about one of the What's New features in AutoCAD Civil 3D 2018.1, Section View Projections and Crossing Enhancements. So there are several new enhancements to the Section View Projections and Crossings features inside of Civil 3D, and it's in the 2018.1 release. So I'm going to take you through those today. We're going to start off, I've got a corridor here with some sections cut on it, so some sample lines are shown. And I'm going to throw some section views out there, and then we're going to start to talk about the new features. So I'm going to run up and I'm going to just create multiple views. This is all done the same as it's been done in the past. I just wanted to go through this and show you from scratch. All right, so these section views are here. You can see we got the sections, we've got our corridor, we've got our existing ground, typical cross-section views. So first thing that's very nice, if we have these section views here and they're zoomed way out, what we can do is if we want to zoom in on a section view itself, all right, so we couldn't do this in the past, but this is a new feature. If I wanted to see this station 3+00, now I have my screen split into two views, so we have a couple steps to this, but if I wanted to just zoom in on that particular section, I can click on that sample line and then select in my other view, right click, and I can go to zoom to section view, and it zooms directly to that particular section view that I wanted to zoom in on. I'll show you that one more time here. If I wanted to go to, say, section view 5+00, I would simply select it, right click, and hit zoom to section view, and it's going to show me that particular section view. This is a very handy tool, being able to very quickly grab that particular section line and go directly to the view. Now, we can also go the other direction with that, all right? So I'm going to zoom way back out, and I'm going to select this section view itself, right click, and go to zoom to sample line, and it will zoom to that sample line. Now, it zoomed to that sample line here in my view because I didn't click back in this other view, so let's do that again. All right, so I'm going to zoom in. I'll select this sample view, and then I'll select here in my other viewport, and I'll go to zoom to sample line, and it will zoom into that sample line. All right, so you can look here at station 11+00. It tends to zoom to the top of it there, so you can see it very closely. Now, we can do that again. Let's zoom back just a little bit. I'll go to station 13+00, and I'll do the same thing, zoom to sample view, and it zooms to that same one. All right, very handy tool on being able to navigate through your section views. Sometimes we know the station that we want to go to, but we don't want to dig through the sections themselves. We might not be the ones that created them, so we might not be as familiar with everything. So this is a very handy tool. So the next thing I want to show you is some of the enhancements inside, just being able to project objects and actually project crossings onto cross sections now, or section views. So I'm going to simply zoom in here at the top on some of these section views, and we'll kind of focus on one here. We don't have to focus on one. I'm just going to pick one that I'm going to zoom into here. And I'm going to go up to section views, and I'm going to drop down to project objects to multiple section views. All right, I'll select my section line, and it brings up the multiple section views option dialog box. Now, one thing I want to point out here first is if we are projecting items, if we are projecting items, period, we need to pay attention to this by percentage or by distance, because if you have multiple items that you're projecting, or that it's going to project, like these points, we'll talk about that in a minute, then they're going to stack on top of each other if you do a 50% overlap. All right, so if you're looking at just wanting to project something that's a certain distance away, I recommend going to this by distance, and say if it will look out 25 feet before and 25 feet after to select anything that you want to project out of these object types. So just kind of be wary of that, and remember to set this setting. We're going to set this to look 10 feet before and 10 feet after our sample lines, right? And I'm going to quickly go through the new features here. So in the past, in Civil 3D 2018, we were able to project all the object types, but we weren't able to drill down into specific object types. So what I mean by that is we can project points, we can project solids, blocks, multi-view blocks, 3D polylines, Kogo points, feature lines and survey figures. All right, so let's take a quick look at what I mean by drill down. So if I select points, there's really nothing to drill down into. There's nothing to really drill down into blocks either. So points, solids, and blocks are pretty straightforward. Multi-view blocks, same thing. But if I look at my 3D polylines, and these are just regular AutoCAD 3D polylines, all right, I can go to my source layers, and I can look at the layers that those polylines were built in. All right, so these layer names kind of make sense. So C-road fence, so that's a fence that's inside this model. That's a polyline that we may want to project and show in our section views, because fence lines a lot of times control where we put things in the roadway, like a ditch or something like that. We want to try and stay away from it, or we may want to target that polyline. Also, we've got two polylines here, and it tells us the number of entities. I'll stretch this out a little bit. It tells us these two entities that it wants to, or that are there to represent the right-of-way. All right. So I can select one of those. Also in Kogo points, we were able to actually sort through the layers themselves for the points. So we may have more than one layer that represents specific things like utilities or signage or something. And we can sort through those and see the number of points per layer. We can also look at the point groups that were built for the Kogo points. So there's a point group left, right, and all points. So if I just wanted to look at and project the points on the left-hand side of the road, then I can turn all of these off and just project the points on the left-hand side of the road. All right, so we're able to drill down and get, a little bit more into more detail as to what points we want to apply, instead of just having to put all the points on there. Also with feature lines, we're able to also look at the source layers. So as you know, you may have several different layers that you have for feature lines. These particular feature lines are all in this CTOPO feature layer. And there are 26 items or 26 feature lines that are there that it's reading. We can look at the source display, and it says varies here. The feature lines that you're going to see are being pulled from the corridor. So we can actually go in and tell it, if we want to show the corridor ditch, we can turn all of these other objects off, or all these other projections that it's going to pull off. We can deselect them and only select the ones that we want to show. Now, I don't have any other feature lines in this drawing besides the feature lines that are being generated from the corridor. But if you had multiple feature lines in here, or you took the 3D polylines and made them feature lines, then you would be able to see those in this dialog box also. But it's just showing the corridor feature lines now. We're also able to utilize the survey figures. We're only able to actually edit the output display on those. So I'm going to go through the process of actually just adding some of this information to the section views and show you how it labels. And I'm going to talk about how the crossings are shown and how the projections are shown, and the differences. So let's do this. Let's go ahead, and we're going to shut off the points and the solids. We're going to start off by projecting a block. All right. So we're just going to project this block. There's 13. All right, 13 blocks out there. The source layer is going to be this V-node pole. So these are utility poles that I'm looking at, and you can see them here in the drawing. So I'm going to go over here to edit my output settings. I'm going to show these as crossings. So I'm going to tell it I want it to draw crossings. I'm going to select a marker style. All right, and this marker style is going to be a block. Okay, so it's basically like a marker style for a point. So you see basic and basic X. I've got a marker style down here for a utility pole that I'm going to select, and it's just going to bring in a block and represent that in our section views. I'm also going to add a label. All right, so we can label all of these. I've got a utility pole label, and I'll hit OK. I'm just going to tell it not to draw the projections. All right, so I don't want it to draw crossings and projections in this particular instance, because it'll duplicate my values on my sections. So I hit OK. So the only thing that should come in is just my block. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. And it projected 3 objects. Now, why did it just project 3 objects? Okay. It projected 3 objects because that is all that was crossing. All right. That was all in the sample lines themselves, that's all we had that actually just crossed right on top of that utility pole. All right, so at station 7 plus 0, 0, if I look here, you can see that's this section view right, or this sample line right here. All right, you can see that it goes directly through the center of that particular power pole. So you can see it's represented very nicely here. We also have this label. That's a crossing label. So I showed it that it's a utility pole and it's got an offset on it so that I can start to kind of show it relative to my design as to where that's going to be affected for my design. So this ditch, when they're grading this ditch, you can see that the existing ground is here. And we could have projected this to the existing ground or added the crossing using the elevation of the existing ground. The next example, I'll show that. But we can take into account, we know that that pole is here. Now we can kind of look at it in our design and say, okay, well, we're going to have to do something with this pole because we're creating a lot of cut here in this situation. So we may have to lower this pole. Now, so that's one type of projection that or crossing that we projected to our cross-section views. Let's go in and do another one. So we're going to project objects to multiple section views again. And I'll select a sample line. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off everything again. We could just project everything if we wanted to, but that really makes the cross sections kind of get garbled up a little bit. So I just have specific things I want to add, and we're able to do that very easily now. I'm going to add a tree because trees are sometimes problems in design because people want to leave them or they may interfere with something. We may need to bulldoze them out. We don't know. So I'm going to go ahead and add those trees. So I'm going to, those trees are represented as multi-view blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and take the other selections off. We can see that we have 21 trees. All right. And I'm going to edit my output value. And in this particular instance, I'm going to make those a crossing also. Now, actually, you know what? I'm going to make those a projection this time. All right. So we drew crossings before. I'm going to do a projection this time. So that style is going to be my tree evergreen. And I've got it set up in the style to be as drawn. So it should give us the 3D object or the 3D block or the multi-view block. And I'm going to go ahead and add my label that I created for that also, my tree label. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick this at the existing ground. So it's going to stick the bottom of the tree at the existing ground wherever it hits. All right, I'll go ahead and hit OK. And what I want to do is make sure that my by distance is set. So I'm just going to set this again to 10 feet to the left and 10 feet to the right, or distance before and distance after. And I'll hit OK. And my projections come in for my trees. So you can see here at station 5 plus 0, 0, I've got a nice label. And again, this is a style, so you can modify this any way you'd like. I just have it shown as an existing tree and the offset to that existing tree. I also have my nice multi-block or multi-view block that came in, and notice it is stuck to the existing ground. This is the existing ground line there. You can see section EG. All right, and we have multiple views of that tree. Next thing I want to project. So I want to project a right-of-way marker. So in the plan view here, you can see that there's a polyline here and a polyline here that represent the right-of-way on our corridor. I want those to be projected so that I can see right-of-way markers inside of my section views, which is a very common label that we have. Now, we will project these items as a crossing because the crossing projections work very well with linear features. So let's go back up to section view and we'll pick projected objects to multiple section views. We'll select our sample lines again. And I'm just going to go ahead and this percentage, I'm going to leave it percentage this time and just bring it down to 0. All right, because it's not going to really look at this. It's going to be looking at any time it crosses that because we're going to use that crossing type of projection. So I'll shut these off again. And I'm going to use my 3D polylines this time. And there's a couple things I want to look at. So my source layers, remember I showed you this before. I've got 3 polylines that are inside of this model, and one of them represents a fence, and one of them represents each side of the right-of-way. So I'm going to turn off the fence. I don't want to show the fence in there. I just want to show the right-of-way. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. Again, this is part of the new feature. You're able to drill down and actually get granular with what you actually project to your section views. Then I'll go ahead and move over here to the edit output. All right, notice we've got draw crossings is set. So we're going to move over here and just fill this out. So we're going to select our marker style. Now remember, this is a marker style. This is much like just a block or an X or something like a point style. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got one built here. Actually, I don't. I'm going to use this basic X. That's something that's maybe typically used for a point, but I just want an X shown and then a label coming off it, so you can make a style for anything that you wanted to show to represent your right-of-way. I'm just going to hit that basic X, and I do have a label style called right-of-way label for my crossing label style. Now, we could set this to the existing ground or set it to a finished grade surface to where it would stick to that. I'm going to go ahead and stick it to my corridor surface, and we'll just see what that looks like. Go ahead and hit OK. Make sure that my projection rules are filled out here, and then I'll hit OK. Now, my right-of-way markers have come in, so I'll zoom in here and I'll look, and you can see that it shows a label with my right-of-way marker. It also shows an X. Now that X is controlled obviously through the style, and I've got it set to actually be annotated. So if I change my annotation scale, it's going to shrink that X and be more cross-section relative, meaning the size of the X itself won't be gigantic. It'll be relative to the scale of the cross-section view. I'll scale that back up. Now, let's look at it again. Why would we want these right-of-way labels in here? Well, one reason would be I'm showing it on my finished grade surface or my corridor surface, so I can actually see if I'm grading into or out of my right-of-way, which sometimes we're told that we need to stay within the right-of-way in a roadway design, and you can visually see if we're having to grade inside that right-of-way line. So we need to maybe make design decisions on whether we change the slope, the daylighting slope from the edge of this ditch back up, to where it daylights before the right-of-way, some kind of scenario like that. So you can see that it projects very, very nicely. We can also zoom in. You can still see the trees. You can still see the right-of-way. And you can, in this particular view, you can see all 3 of the items that we actually projected. So you can see the tree, you can see the utility pole, you can see the right-of-way. Now this right-of-way marker popped down here at the bottom. All right, that's because there's no surface here. You can see that we daylight right here, okay? So there wasn't a surface for it to read, so it put it at a standard depth. So I didn't want you to think that was a problem with the projections. I just wanted you to see that it does still put it in there, but it just puts it at a specific depth or a specific elevation inside of there so that we can still represent the right-of-way. One other thing I'll show, or I've got a couple more things I'll show, but one thing I want you to remember, all of these projections that we project across sections are dynamic. So that's station 7 plus 0, 0. All right, I'll zoom in here on station 7 plus 0, 0. And if I move this tree, all right, you can see the tree move there on the screen. And notice that it didn't move that time. The reason it didn't is because it got outside of my parameters when I set it. I moved it further away from its original point. So I think the distance that we moved was 10 feet. So it went out of that 10-foot area, so it didn't move past that 10 feet. So I can continue to move it. And you can see that it does move. It's not moving very much. I'll zoom in a little bit, but we can move it, and you can see. Now I can also move it in. All right, and you can see it move into the section view. Let's move it out and see what it does. There we go. So it is set to sit on the existing ground, so it is hugging that existing ground pretty tight. I can keep moving it, and it'll just keep on moving it out. So these are dynamic. So if something was to happen and these items have to move, the cross-section views do update. And the labels themselves, if I zoom in here and move this again, all right, and I'll move it out here, you can see that the offset the offset distance is changing per my move. Very, very handy tool. Now, one other thing I'd like to show you is that we can actually go back and project objects per section view. All right, so if I look here at my station 2+00, I remember before when we projected the utility poles, we projected them as a crossing. So if it didn't cross, it didn't project it. Okay, so I want to go back in and project that, just to try and, I know it's a little bit further away from that sample line, which is right here, but I want to go ahead and project it so that I can see maybe how it might affect my design. So I'm going to project this utility pole onto station 2+00. So if I select that sample line, right click and go to Project Objects to Section View and select that utility pole, it brings up my dialog box to just set my projection settings. Now, this will not be a crossing because the sample line is not going through it. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to go ahead and show you here. I'll widen this box out. Our projection style is going to be this utility pole projection style. It's going to show the block. My label is going to be the utility pole label. And I'm going to tell it to go ahead and stick to my EG surface. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to stick it to the object elevation. Just hit OK, and it puts that in. Now, what happens if I wanted it to stick to the EG, or the existing ground, instead of coming in as what the object elevation is? If I select my cross-section view, right-click and go to Section View Properties, I can see here that my utility pole is shown. I'm going to have to reproject it, so I just want to select that utility pole. I can right-click and remove it and hit OK, and it goes away. Then I just go through the process again of adding that back, or projecting that utility pole back. So I'm going to project objects again, and I'll turn off my crossing selection. I will set this to my utility pole again. I will use my utility pole label, and I will go ahead and tell it to stick to the existing ground. Now it's going to be the existing ground. Remember, it's going to be existing ground at that location, not at the sample line location. So it may look a little off. Hit OK. So you can actually see that the center of this utility pole is just a little bit higher than the existing ground. So that just takes into account for the fact that it's moved a little bit off that sample line. So I don't want you to think that that's off. That's just what the elevation is at that particular point. So again, what does this enhancement help us with? It gives us better control over projecting objects to multiple section views. We're able to filter projectable objects by layer, by style, by point group, things of that nature. It's easier to project objects from plan view. You just simply, like I just showed you, you just simply select a crossing or a sample line and then select the object you want to project. It's easier to show and hide projected crossing objects. We can turn things on and off per section view. It does display that crossing label and the projection label as it should. You have more granular control over the projected objects that are displayed. We're able to drill down a little bit deeper into the dialog and just show what we want to show. So I think that you'll see that main business benefit is going to be saving time, picks and clicks. It's going to streamline all your tasks for section views and being able to project objects to it, which reduces the time for repetitive tasks. I hope that the information in this video has helped you to understand one of the new features inside of Civil 3D 2018.1. I want to thank you for watching and have a great day.